Hello and welcome to this basic walk cycles tutorial. My name is Gabriel Chaquette. I'm the 2D animation professor at Herzing College in Ottawa, Canada. I have 20 years experience in the animation industry, and I'm just going to give you my take on how to do a walk cycle. Now obviously there are a lot of walk cycle tutorials on YouTube. They're all very good. I'm just going to give you my take on it. And of course, I'll be using Toon Boom Harmony 17. So here we go. Without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need is obviously a rig and a background with some type of grid on the floor. Two lines where we can track where the feet are, and two lines at the top so we can tell how high and how low the character is going to be, because when you walk, your head goes up and down. So here we go. The first thing you're going to need is your full stride. Now, one of the first mistakes that animators do when they start a walk cycle is they will tend to do, they might have too large of strides, and that's going to cause problems. So make sure that it's not too short and not too wide. So once you find your full stride here, it's going to be heel on the floor and toes on the line here. I'm just going to go ahead and lock my background and my floor grid because I don't want to keep hitting it. All right. Another mistake that animators do is they will not have proper reaction force. So reaction force is basically the opposite. So if this leg is in the back, the same side arm is going to be in the front. But if you're not paying attention to that, you might have both the right arm and the right leg in the back, and both of the left leg and left arm in the front, and that's going to cause your walk cycle to look very, very funny. So make sure that you have proper reaction force. Left leg in the back, left arm in the front, and vice versa on the other side. Another mistake that animators will do is they will have on one side a small stride, and on the other side they'll have a lot longer stride. So you want to make sure that both your strides are of equal distance. So I'm matching my feet and I'm making sure that they are equal distance. And you want to make sure that your heel is right on the floor here and the toes are on the other line. Otherwise, your character is going to sink in and out of the floor. Now also, at this point here, you want your character's head to be near the bottom line. So when the character is standing, it should be between those two lines, right? So your character is going to be a little higher when they walk and a little bit lower when they have their full strides. So here's my character standing, and here's my character on his stride. So you can see that he's a little bit lower than usual, and both strides here he's going to be at the same height. Kind of like that. Another thing that animators will do is they will tend to play it very, very safe with the arms and leg and keep it in the exact same spot. Don't be scared to move this arm back when the character is going this way, and move it forward when they're walking forward. This way you can get some nice shoulder action this way. And you want just enough so you have nice shoulder action. So the next step will be to find the passing pose, as they say. The passing pose is when one foot is under the body and the other foot is halfway going to the other stride. Now there's a very simple way to do this. So what I do is first of all, once you have your two strides here, you can copy the first stride and put it back on the other side, because your character is going to eventually go back to that full stride. So we can start with that. What I like to do is I like to copy my work here on the timeline. I like to copy it whenever I'm going to change something. In case I'm not happy with it, I can always go back to the original little copy here. Okay. So I'm going to be working here, and because I only have the one frame in between those two, I just need to tween it, and then I'll be perfectly in the middle here. Right, so the legs are perfectly timed, but I have to work this frame a little bit. So here my character is going to be at the highest point, about here, and this leg I have to keep on the line. So I'm just resetting my foot here, and I'm going to keep that foot on the line, and this foot now this is another thing that's you're gonna face here. It will look like the foot is going through the floor here, so you want to keep that foot above this line on the floor, and you want to bend this leg sort of halfway, like so. And you can turn on your onion skin to make sure that that foot is going to be, we have to give it some direction a little bit, like that. And then you can flip through your keys. And you can also squash and stretch ever so slightly here. And the arm is going to be exactly in the middle between those two frames, but I am going to give it some drag. The drag will already be there when I start to in between. So here's my passing pose. Just going to give this a little bit of drag here. And we're going to do the same thing to the other stride here. We're going to give the same treatment. So I just leave one frame gap here. I tween it. I'm going to find the exact middle, and then I'm just going to work that frame. Now you want to have the same height on the half strides here. So I'm going to try to Careful not to grab your, if you grab the whole rig, then your shadow is going to come with it. So you want to make sure that that is not the case here. And now I'm going to give the same treatment to his legs. So half stride, full stride, and then half stride on this one here. And I'm going to keep that foot on the line. And I want to make sure that this foot doesn't sink through the floor. So I'm going to have to bring this up a little bit. You absolutely want to parent up and down when you're doing a walk cycle, when you're using Harmony. So there are cases where breaking the rig is a must or is acceptable, but when you're doing a walk cycle, do not break the rig. It will be a nightmare once you go into animation or in-betweening. So always practice good parenting, as they say. So now I have my full stride, half stride, full stride, and half stride on the other side. And it's coming back to the original spot. I can give some drag on this arm, just making things late ever so slightly. If you don't make things late, your character, the timing will look very, very mechanical and robotic. So you just want to point whatever you want to be late or have drag. You just want to point the edges to where they used to be. So that used to be right there. So I'm just pointing it in that direction. That's the secret to having nice drag here. So now we have our keys done. So we started with the full strides, back to the first stride, and then we added one frame in between. We tweened it, made it so that the half stride is the highest point, and the full stride is the lowest point. Highest point, back to that. So now we have all of this. The next step will be to do some in-betweening. All right, so once I have my all my keys here, I'm just going to press Control, highlight this, and slide it over here so I can mess with that, and if I need to go back to the original, then I have it saved right here. So now we're going to add some in-betweens. Now I found out this trick where for the in-betweens, we're going to add 1, 2 between each key here. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. And I'm going to put a start and a stop here, and I'm just going to work in this area right here. So I'm going to add my tween, and already our walk cycle is coming to life. The character's head is going up and down. The legs are working fine, but it still needs some attention, because as you can see here, the feet are going to go through the floor here and come off the lines. So we want to keep it nice and tight. So I'm going to start back here, and I'm just going to make sure I key everything. So I'm going to key this, key that. I'm just basically at this point turning my tween into keyframes, because those keyframe needs to be adjusted. We need to polish this so that it looks really, really good. Now, here's the way I teach the walk cycle is this point right here. I haven't seen any other tutorial teach it like this, because the tutorial will teach you to do this and then this one right here, this frame. And that becomes a little bit hard to do when you're trying to digest the full stride and the half stride. So I took this out, and this one is called the contact position. So this one is like the contact for the heel, but the very next frame here, if you don't take notice of this, the foot is not on the floor yet. So it's kind of like the character looks like he's kind of floating. So what you want to do is right after the heel touches the floor on the full stride, the frame right after that, that's where you want this foot to hit the ground hard. And this is where we can have some squash. All right. And we're also going to put some squash in the leg here. We're going to make it look like his muscles are contracting. Now, obviously, depending on the type of character you have, you might not want to do this too much. But I'm just going to make it look like his leg muscle is contracting here on the impact. And another thing I'm going to do is so the body is going to want to go back up here because it's being tweened to the next highest point. But instead of having the body go up here, I'm going to have the body go lower than before. So this one will actually be the lowest point when the character's foot hits the ground. So contact, heel to the floor, full foot on the floor, lowest point of the head, and the rest should just blend in easily here. I can make this arm a little late, like that. And I'm going to have the same problem on the next frame here. This foot was being tweened, so that is not on the floor. So what I can do is I can retween that leg. I can just delete that keyframe, retween it, and pop a new keyframe in there. So now this foot is the contact is pretty good, but as you can see, it's starting to go down this way. So I'm just going to keep that foot sort of flat on that line here, and I'm using the whole peg. It's not that big of a difference. Like if you're doing this, then it's really going to show, but if you're just doing it like that, it's not a big deal. So heel to the floor, whole foot on the floor right away, and then continue your walk cycle. And we're going to do the same treatment to the other leg here. And I want to make sure that this foot, this leg, stays on that line. So I'm going to give the same treatment to this leg. Now this leg, you're going to see that it's going to go through the floor here. So I'm going to keep that leg going up here, I'm going to keep it going up. I'm going to stretch it a little bit. And just try to keep that foot from going through the floor or hitting the floor. And same with this one here. I'm going to keep it like that. So it just needs a little bit of love. Same treatment to this foot now. Heel to the line, and then the very next frame, that foot has to hit. And we're going to give it a little bit of squash and stretch here. And give some squash and stretch to the leg. And when the foot is fully on the ground, that will be the lowest point of the character. Then he goes back up. And then here I can retween this frame here, right? If you need to see it on the timeline, you can open it up and delete that keyframe, retween, and put a new keyframe in there. Make sure you don't have any runaway tweens. And I'm going to keep that leg right here on the line. And I don't want this foot to get in the way. And this one is very tricky. You don't want your character to take like giant steps like that, so that the foot doesn't hit the floor. You still want to be, you know, kind of like discreet about it. And there. So now that that's done, I'm just going to make sure that I have some nice drag in the arms here. So here's our walk cycle. Obviously he's walking a little bit too fast. And one thing you're going to want to do is do not show when you're looping it. You don't want to show, see how I have a start here and a stop here on the same frame. Don't show the same frame twice. So you can omit the one at the end. So you can click here and put a stop there. And now there's not going to be a hiccup. The character is going to walk. It's going to walk just fine. Now, obviously, he's walking too fast because he's on ones. So now I'm just going to put everything on twos. I'm going to put a frame in between all of my keys here. And I'm going to put the stop here. And here's my walk cycle. It's not too bad. here is the polished version that I did before. So this one's a little bit more polished and finished. And there you go. If I track the feet here, the feet stay on the line. And that's it. That is how you do a walk cycle. So join us next time. I'm going to show you how to have this character walk across the screen and the do's and don'ts of doing that. Hope you enjoyed. Hit like and subscribe, and I will see you later. One thing I forgot to mention is the shadow. You can animate your shadow along with the strides and half strides, just so that the shadow grows and shrinks. It'll just add that extra little bit of detail into your animation. So if you've already animated your shadow, you can go down on the timeline, find it, erase the keyframes, and just set the keyframes to as wide as possible for the full stride, and then make sure you copy that same size of a shadow to the other stride, and then we're going to give the same treatment to the half stride. So find your half stride, shrink the shadow, and then of course copy that key into the other half stride, back to the full stride, and tween it. And we're not pulling frames here, we're just going to set the keys. I always start at the end and go backwards, because as soon as you enter the key, it makes the tween disappear. Like so. And then make sure you don't have any runaway tweens there. Make sure it's on 2s and there's nothing tweened, because things look better on 2s. And then that's it. Another trick I forgot to tell you is you can copy your walk cycle, the loop. Just make sure you don't copy the first keyframe twice, because you don't want to have the full stride show up twice. So I'm just making sure that it loops up properly. So I highlight everything, press Control, shift it over, make sure that the walk loops up, and then I do it again. Let's do it a couple times here. Press Control, shift it down, make sure you didn't make a mistake. And I keep that little keyframe at the top there just to show where the beginning of the walk cycle is. It's kind of like a little visual reference. Shows me where it loops. And now you can make a quick time and just have your character walk. You don't want to have a quick time where your character takes 2 steps and stops. You want to make it a little bit longer so we can take a look at the walk. And then it'll play for a while. All right, so that's it.